and welcome to all of you who are attending this seminar. Let's jump right into leadership for project managers and some not-so-common secrets on how to make those work. So I'd like to start with quoting W. Edward Deming, so I'm sure all of you are familiar with. He's the father of lean principles and the quality movement. He was really the force, the intellectual property provider that took Toyota from a virtually unknown, very small automobile manufacturing company to the largest automobile manufacturing company in the world by virtue of helping them create their Toyota production system. And W said, anytime the majority of the people behave a particular way the majority of the time, so it doesn't mean all the time, but the majority of the time, if the majority of the people behave a certain way, the problem is inherent in the system. In other words, it's not the person's problem, it's the system that's creating some unovercomable obstacle for them. And that system, in fact, belongs to you, the leader. You own it and are responsible for it. So in today's case, what we're talking about today, leadership for project managers, there are two primary systems we want you to recognize that you own and are responsible for. The first is your thinking, and the second is your action. And we are going to use, in fact, some proven research to challenge both of those by quoting some things from the book, The Four Disciplines of Execution. You should recognize, first of all, that the first survey they did in order to begin the research that led to this book, they surveyed 13,000 people in 17 different industries, 500 different companies. So a very statistically significant sample size. And they found that 81% of those who had been surveyed said they held accountable for making regular progress, and 87% said they had no clear idea what they should be doing to help achieve the goal. So when you have 4 out of 5, 8 out of 10 of your people who don't feel held accountable and have no idea what they're doing, you're not leading. That's really what the outcome of this work was. They did subsequent work where they've now surveyed north of 300,000 people. They've implemented their 4-discipline system 1,500 times. Along the way, they developed rules for success. And their rules were, number one, focus on the single most important goal. They call it the wildly important goal, the WIG. That's the first thing you need to do. Number two, you need to act on lead measures. What is it that you can change now that will bear the outcome, the fruit, the result that you want in the future? Number three, hurry in a way that's compelling so you know whether you're making progress. And number four, create a cadence ability. You know, it's very interesting when you look at these 4 rules of success, begin to line up very nicely with lean principles and with agile project management. Choice is as real as it is stark. You can accomplish one major, what they call wildly important goal, or you can throw up a pile of stuff and accomplish nothing meaningful. And so leader means that you should be focused on what's important, in fact, what's wildly important, and how can you facilitate that. Let's look at a piece of research specifically focused on project managers. This book was based on the research done by Andy Crow, who many of you may know from Velocity, and his research was focused on what is it that the top 2% of project managers do that everybody else fails to do, that the vast majority fail to do. And so they asked a variety of questions, they interviewed managers, and they had a whole conversation as part of this research. And one of the questions they asked was, do you have adequate authority to manage your project? Point out to you that the single most important project of your life is your life. It really is. Sorry, it looks like we had a little difficulty with getting the slides up. I apologize for that. Hopefully you can all see them now. So the single most important question, do you have adequate authority to manage your project? Well, the non-alpha project managers, the 98%ers, on average, 47% of them said yes, whereas the alpha project managers, that top 2% where you want to be, almost 90% of them, 89% said yes, they had adequate authority. Now, when their managers were asked, in both cases, nearly 90% of the managers said they had adequate authority. You see, there's a big disconnect for non-alphas at the attitude level. You see, leadership and authority are something you have to assume, you have to choose, and you have to move towards it while there's still unknowns, while there's still vagueness in the environment. Additional content that came from this beautiful research that Andy Crow did in Alpha Project Managers, they said, can you state your organization's top 3 strategic goals? Well, only 23% of the non-alphas actually could, whereas 60% of the alpha project managers, that top 2%, 60% of them could. You see, the alphas were more than 150% more aware of the organization's goals, and that meant they could align to it. That gave them the empowerment, that gave them that sense of authority and the ability to tap formal authority when they needed to move their project forward. So you see, simply being aware doubles the odds that you'll get the key projects at work, and more importantly, simply being aware that leadership is a wildly important goal for your life, the project, if you will, of your life, means you'll give it the attention it needs and deserves to become that true leader in your organization, in your environment. So what 2 factors are most responsible for your success? Well, what does the central limit theorem suggest? You're all familiar with the bell curve, of course. And there are 2 factors that the central limit theorem would suggest. But let's start with a question before we answer or identify what those 2 factors are. Let me ask you a question. If I gave you a AAA map, and I told you to meet me in Chicago next Wednesday so I could give you $10 million, what are the 2 most important things you need to succeed? What are the 2 most important things you need to collect that $10 million? What you're going to find is that knowledge of your resources is one of those things. You need to know where you're at. You need to know your starting point, or else that map is entirely worthless. And the second thing is you need to know what resources are available. Can you use a bus? Can you use a car? Can you use a plane? How can you get to Chicago? There's very many different ways. You could hitchhike there possibly if you're close enough and you had the time and were so inclined. Well, an interesting study. Again, I wanted to share with you this research that points you towards how to become a really, truly powerful leader. The research done in 1953 studied the graduating seniors at Yale University. Now, I think you'd all agree with me that if you graduated from Yale University, you are by definition advantageously positioned. You come from some kind of background that helped you get to Yale. You have some kind of mental capacity to be at Yale, and you're going to make, most probably, amazing connections while you are at Yale. So all of the students in this survey were advantageously positioned, but only 3% of them, at the time they were graduating, had written goals. Well, 20 years later, in 1973, they did a follow-up on that graduating class from Yale University. The 3% who had the written goals when they graduated from college had a combined net worth greater than the combined net worth than the other 97% of that class from Yale. Now understand that graduates from Yale don't end up with low net worth. So for the 3% to have a combined net worth greater than 97% means there was something significant